Good afternoon, myself Dr. Ravi Kumar Poluru. So today's topic is anti-crafts of the process. So yesterday we have discussed the what is meant by anti-craft and what is the anti-crafts in the software engineering as well as the software project management. Today we are going to discuss about what the remaining part of the anti-crafts of the process. We know that anti-craft is nothing but it is a tangible in the sense we can touch and we can feel. So mainly these anti-crafts are mainly used for to well documented during the software project. Okay, so today yesterday we have seen that anti-crafts facts sets consisting of 5 types. It is divided into 5 types. First one is management set, and second one is requirement set, and third one is so this third one is very important for the designing anti-craft sets, that is design sets. And the fourth one is implementation set. And the last set today we are going to discuss, that is deployment set. Okay, so yesterday we have discussed these 4 sets, that is management set, requirement set, and design set, and implementation set. So today we are going to discuss about the deployment set and how this deployment set will be very useful for the anti-crafts for the process. And also we'll see the main difference between the implementation and deployment sets here. Okay, so this is mainly used for to smoothen the process of the software project. Okay, so here today we are going to discuss about the deployment. We know that deployment is nothing but the integration part of the all modules we need to integrate it. So we need to do the unit testing, system testing, and integration testing here. In deployment, the developers has to know about the full knowledge about the all the modules, requirements, design part as well as the implementation part here. This is the final product which they need to release to the end market. Okay, so this deployment set is very crucial for the end products, and also these stakeholders need to understand what is the quality of the software project here. Okay, now development set is nothing but it is a user deliverables. It means the final product has to be set to the end market, so that they need to understand how this data, the machine language notations, so they need to understand what are the main notations of the machine languages and executable softwares. These softwares can be have the different types of the versions like alpha and beta, so they can use the different types of the versions. But before releasing any versions of the softwares, they need to understand what is the current as well as the previous software versions. And also here they need to understand how the build scripts need to write the coding and the installation scripts, and finally the executable target specific data need to know about for the target environment. So this is the final product, so they need to understand each and every module. So the developer has to understand in which language they are written, and for example if they are written in the machine language notations, they need to understand what is the product components in the target form, so that how the information will be distributed to the users. And next one is in the deployment set, mainly they need to understand that so what is the installed softwares will be there and what are the executed. Means for example if they are taking some scenarios like testing, so as we told that the modules. So we can have the different types of modules. These modules can be clubbed as a unit testing. Okay, so they can perform the unit testing, or they can do the system testing, or they can have the integration testing. Okay, so these executable scenarios can be tested, and also mainly they need to concentrate on whether they need to use the statical or dynamically reconfigured. Okay, we know that static is nothing but it is in a fixed one. So mainly for any products, for execution of the any software, so they require only the dynamically. So because they need to reconfigure the product's features each and every time when they're releasing the end product. So that's why they require the dynamically reconfigured. Okay, and also they require some specific anti-graphs. So this can be how this executable code as well as the associated runtime files will be used for the user manual. Okay, now we'll see how these deployment sets will be evaluated and assessed and can be measured with the help of the to improve the quality. So we know that deployment is nothing but mainly for testing scenarios. So they can have the different types of the testing. So we have the white box as well as the black box testing. So there they can have the different types of the scenarios based upon the usage and also quality. So mainly the ultimate goal for any organization is they need to improve the quality. So based upon that, they required to improve the or define the requirements to evaluate the consistency and the completeness. So mainly they need to check that the product or the quality must be consistency and the completeness, and also how balance between the two sets here. So in the testing, mainly they can have the partitioning. Okay, so you have seen that the modules can be divided from 1 to n. So these modules can be assigned to the different types of the developers. Okay, means the modules can be partitioned. Okay, and these modules can be clubbed during the deployment sets, and replications and allocation strategies in mapping. So this data can be set to a physical resources. Okay, for that they need to verify what type of the platform type they need to use, and how many number of physical resources need to be used in the deployment system. And mainly they can think about what type of the network topology can be used. So we know that the network topology is mainly used to communicate the information from one from one developer to the another developer. So the information has to be transmitted here based upon the network. The popular network topology is mesh topology. So this mesh topology will be providing very reliable compared to the remaining network topologies. And also mainly they need to test different types of the usage scenarios based upon the user manual. So mainly when you're taking some product, for example, if you are purchasing any product like a washing machine or refrigerator, first what we'll do means we are going to check that user manual. In user manual, they will give that if it is a DIY, that is do it yourself, then they can give the clear instructions how we are going to install and how we are going to configure and maintain the usage, and how the information can be utilized to install that particular product. So in this testing, mainly it will be depending upon the user manual. So in the manual, they can have the installation and user-oriented dynamic reconfiguration and mainstream usage and anomaly management. These can be have in the user manual, so that they're going to check that analysis how the informations can be changed based upon the current and previous versions. This will be very important because whenever they're releasing any software or the product, they need to compare with the previous versions. Okay, if they're not comparing the previous versions of the software or the product, so they can have more number of defects. So that's why whenever the changes will be happen, they need to scrutinize very clearly about the current versions and also the previous versions. So like defect elimination rates, how much the problems or the issues can be eliminated, and what is the performance, the previous versions and the current versions. So they need to have the clear look and comparison between the current versions as well as the previous versions here. And the last one is they need to check that what is the quality they can achieve based upon the subjective review. So this inspection is very important to scrutinize what is the quality of the product or software project. So mainly when they're doing the peer inspection, they're going to check that the quality. If there is no any errors, then the quality will be improved because it is a completeness as well as the consistency. So that's why peer inspection is very important for each and every phases here. Okay. And the next one is they need to select the management and requirements, design, implementations, and the last one is deployment set here. So this can be sometimes may not be scientific. So they need to optimize some presentations based upon the process activities and anti-graphs and also objectives. So mainly the clear idea about is they need to achieve the goals based upon the how they are going to utilize this resource very effectively. And also here, whenever they're taking some results oriented, the conceptual framework is very important because they need to check that what is the components they have implemented in the frameworks and what are the different types of the components they need to use. Is there any how several minor exceptions will be minimized, and they need to understand overall what are the anti-craft sets will be there. Okay, so in each anti-craft sets, they need to define the different types of the notations, and they need to use the some relevant notations. And we have discussed the management set notations like adopt text, graphics, and use case notations. This can be captured and plan, process, objectives, as well as the acceptance criteria. So this they need to understand in the management set notations. So how the information can be planned and they can be how the process, how this can be acceptance by the users. So, and also we know that the requirement notations such as structured text. So we need to differentiate the structured text as well as the UML models. So when you're considering the UML models, the user can easily grasp the what are the different types of the texture will be there and representation of the architecture. They need to capture the engineering context as well as the operational concept here. Okay, so in the design notations, mainly in the design notations, they can have the visual modeling such as the UML, and the engineer need to capture the blueprints of the architecture design and the component design. So in the architecture design has to be cooperate through the software and the different types of the component they need to use. The next one is implementation notation. So in the implementation notation, so which software language they need to implement, such as the high level programming languages, Fortran, okay, C++, Java, and Visual Basics like that they need to capture for the building blocks of the solutions. So this can be easily understood by the human readable formats. And the last one is deployment notations. In the deployment notations, we can have that the executable as well as the data files. So what are the executable files will be there and how they can capture in the machine readable formats. So in the deployment notations, mainly this will be done through the systems. And also they need to select the management, requirement, design part, and implementation, and sometimes the deployment sets cannot be scientific. The ultimate goal for this one is they need to use the process activities and anti-graphs and objectives so that they can resolve the conceptual framework in a proper manner. Okay, so here for example, they're considering several minor exceptions like they need to understand what are the overall anti-graph sets will be there and what are the different types of the articraft sets they're going to use, and the different notations they need to capture, so that this uh, articraft sets has to be matched to the relevant articrafts, and the different types of the management set notations. So we know that management notation sets is nothing but the text, graphics, or the use case notations, and also they need to capture some process objectives and acceptance criteria. Okay, so in the requirement notations, then we can have the different types of the text as well as the UML models. So these can be captured and understand by the operational concept here. And whereas in the, if you are considering the design notations, we need to capture the blueprint such as the architecture design and component design, and implementation notations such as the different types of the programming languages, like software languages they need to capture, so that it will be easily understood by the human. And deployment notations, in the deployment notations, executable and data files can be readable by the machine, machine readable formats. So these notations is very important in the deployment notations. So here in this diagram we can have the 5 sets. Okay, management and requirement, design, implementation, and deployment sets will be there. Okay, so we know that we have the life cycle phases is divided into 4 types. One is inception, and another one is elaboration. Next one is construction and transition. Okay, now here the question is, what is the main focus of the life cycle will be happen for the anti-craft sets? So if you are considering the management, okay, in the management we know that so they're going to concentrate about mainly for all the phases such as the inception, elaboration, constructions, and the transition. Okay, so whereas the requirements, in the requirement stage for the sets, they are going to concentrate on the inception. So we know that inception is mainly handling that the requirements, different types of the requirements, and the plan. So that's why here most of the requirement sets they're going to concentrate about the inception. And in the elaboration, so the design part will be happen here. Only minimal amount of the design, means they're going to check that what are the main requirements will be for the design part or the architecture part. Okay, and the construction means what, which programming language they need to implement in the constructions. So it will be very little one here. And the transaction, so they won't go for the deployment. And whereas in the design sites, okay, so already we know that what are the main requirements here. Okay, and planning will be done in the previous phase only. Whereas in the design, that is, so they are going to concentrate about the elaboration. So they are going to design this architecture. So mainly concentration about the different types of the components and the architecture and constructions. So here the 30% of the constructions such as the implementation. So which programming language they need to use and which will be very useful for the unique during the construction phase here. Okay, and in the implementation, so we have completed the requirement and the design part. Okay, now in the implementation, that is construction. So overall, so which models they need to use here and what are the main knowledge about these programming languages they are going to understand here. And the final one is the deployment. In the deployment, so each and every phases they need to understand clear idea about the different types of the stages here. So finally, we know that the transition is nothing but the overall product is finalized and it will be delivering to the end product. So these are the different types of the life cycles which will be combined with the anti-craft sets here. Okay, so here most of the today's software developments they need to map these 5 anti-craft sets. So in management, we are seeing that management need to understand what is the schedule time for that particular software project, and they need to understand what is the workflow, how this workflow will be happen during the initial stage of the software development. So each and every review meeting, they need to track about the what are the issues or the defects will be good. And if any changes during the plan or the cost, so they need to have the change management. And the documentation is very important during the initial stage. So that's why user documentation is very important for the management set here. And next one is spreadsheet. So in the spreadsheet, they need to use the different types of the spreadsheets, and they need to clearly have some planning, that is scheduling and the cost budgets of the each and every resources. And they need to maintain the various resources management here. Okay. And finally, presentation tools. Here, the management need to understand, so what are the architecture they're going to use here, and different types of the, if any changes will be happen, the stakeholders and management know, they need to understand how the changes will be happen during the presentation. And the next set is requirements. We know that the requirements have different types of the requirements, and the planning will be done through the management tools only. Whereas the design, so design is nothing but the architecture part. Okay, so in this architecture, they need to have the different types of the components. So they need to use the different types of the components and the visual modeling tools. Okay, so what are the different types of the tools can be used? It will be very helpful when you are using the automated tools here. Why means, so when you compare with the automated tools as well as the human generated tools, these automated tools will be have much more knowledge, and it will be completed within cost effective, and within less time it will be designing. So whereas human, they may take more time, and the cost also will be very high here. And during the implementation, we know that implementation, we can have the different types of the programming language, and we can use the compiler or the debugger tools. So based upon the programming language we are going to choose, and code analysis tools will be there, and test coverage analysis tools, and finally test management tools need to use in the implementation anti-craft sets here. And whereas in the deployment, they need to understand what are the different types of the test can be used here, like test coverage and test automation tools, network management tools, and commercial components can be used. So these commercial components can be implemented in the operating systems, and a graphical user interface, and database management system, networks, middlewares, and installation tools. So in the deployment stage, each and every person has to be know about which testing tools need to use. So whether they need to use the automated tools or the human generated tools. Okay, so mainly they need to concentrate on the automated tools, because when they're using the automation tools, it can be easily identify the different types of the defects tracking, and to resolve the problems or the defects within a stipulated time here. Okay, now we'll see the what is the main difference between, or the versus between the implementation and deployment set. So we know that implementation set, we have seen that, so we need to use the different types of the programming languages and the component tools or compiler or the debuggers. So whereas in the deployment sets, so there we need to use the testing automation tools. Okay, so here the separation of the implementation. So implementation set is nothing but the source code. So mainly we need to use the high level programming language here. Okay, so from the deployment set, so deployment set is nothing but it will be executable by the machines. Okay, so there we can have the executable files will be there, and whereas here we have the compiler or debugger tools which can be understood by the human. Okay, so in the implementation sets, so we can have the different types of the programming languages, and whereas in the deployment, so this can be executable code which will be understood by the machines. Okay, so there are very different concerns will be there based upon the anti-craft sets. Now we'll see one by one. The first one is the structure of the information delivered to the user. So when you're taking the the implementation and the deployment, the structure will be differ when we are having the different types of the aircraft sets here. So for the test organization, so we need to use the different types of the structures of the source code. The programming languages will be differed based upon the organization. And the next one is engineering decision. So engineering decision is very important because they are going to concentrate on the quality of the deployment set. So mainly they should not be compromised on the quality. So they need to improve the more quality in the during the final stage, that is deployment set here. Okay, so here we have the dynamically reconfigurable parameters. Okay, so in the design and the implementation sets, they need to include some parameters such as buffer sizes, okay, and the color palettes, and number of servers they need to implement here, and number of simulators clients and data files need to use, and finally runtimes parameters. So these are the different types of the parameters they need to use during the implementation as well as the design part here. So when they're using the different types of these tools, so it will be very helpful for clearly understand during the design part as well as the implementation. And this will be effects for the compilers or the link optimization. Okay, so like space optimizations will be there. So when you're using the different like compiler or the debuggers, so when you're optimized, the space will be reduced. So when the space is reduced, automatically the speed will be improved here, and the performance also will be improved. So we need to verify about how the performance will be improved based upon the allocation strategies, such as whether we need to use the centralized versus distributed. Okay, we know that the main drawback in the centralized is if the server is failed, then all the points of the system will be degraded. So the transmission of the information cannot be transmitted from server to the receivers. So that is the main problem here. So whereas the distributed, the information will be distributed through all the servers. The information will be secured. Even one system is failure, the another system will be activated and information will be transmitted very smoothly here, so that performance will be improved here. And also the primary and the shadow threads. So mainly we need to concentrate whether we need to use the primary or the shadow threads will be there. And dynamic load balancing. So nowadays mainly we need to concentrate on the dynamic load balancing, because we don't know when the server will be having scalability. Okay, it means for example, if you're taking when the results is released, so more number of users will be opening that particular site or the server. So then if not providing the appropriate servers, there is no load balancing. So the servers will be degraded, the performance will be degraded, and the results cannot be viewed here. So that's why they require the dynamic load balancing. Means the information has to be transmitted from one server to the another server, and to balance the information between from one system to the or from one point to the another point. And also they need to use the hot backup versus checkpoints of the rollback. Okay, as I told that when you are using the centralized servers or the systems, if the server is failed, then the information cannot be transmitted or retrieved back here. Then we cannot access what are the main important information can be here. So that's why we require hot backup. Okay, the information should be, we need to store in a separate or external data, or else we can have the checkpoints of the rollback. So this means we need to take the backups every weekly or monthly. So this information can be secured in the different storage devices, and they need to use the virtual machine constraints. Okay, so mainly nowadays we can have the virtual systems or the machines. It will be very helpful to view the different types of the operating system, and we can access the information from one device to the another device. So here we can have the constraints such as file descriptors, okay, and garbage collections, and heap size, and maximum record size, and the last one is disk file rotations. So whenever we are accessing the virtual machines, we need to check that what is the file description. Okay, and is there any garbage collections will be there? Because when you're transmitting the information continuously, we need to check that the information will be stored in a sequential manner or not. If not, then the garbage will be very high here. And we need to allocate the what is the size of the heap for each and every table content. And we need to check that what is the minimum and what is the maximum record size here. Okay, and the last one is the process level concurrency issues. Okay, so mainly when you are taking the different types of the resources, we need to check that is there any deadlock or the risk conditions will be happen. Okay, so if deadlock is happen, we need to check that to avoid this deadlock. So we need to provide the sufficient resources to the process. And also here we have the platform specific differences. Okay, so here when you're taking the Windows, Ubuntu or Linux, like the different types of the platforms, then we need to check that what is the performance or the behavior of the system. And also we need to check that the configuration information. So configuration information is very important for the engineering source because they need to capture for the implementation setting. So the information has to be incorporated into the source code. So whereas in the deployment sets, the information has to be transmitted for the data files, configuration files, installation scripts, or other target specific components. And here we have the dynamic reconfigurable systems. So we have seen that when you're taking the different types of the parameters, mainly we need to use the dynamic resources of the reconfigure systems, because some systems can be have the work on particular period and another cannot be used the utilization. So whenever that particular resources wants to allocate, then we need to check that based upon the dynamic reconfiguration, and information has to be transmitted or separate from the source code implementations from the target environment, so that the performance will be improved and portability will be very high, and we can change the source code whenever we require. So here, whenever they require, the information will be improved here. It means the performance will be improved based upon the availability of the resources. Okay, and next one is the implementations can be. So we have seen that coupling and decoupling. Okay, so in the implementation, when you are doing the decoupled, so the actual platform type, and we need to check that what are the number and topology. So we can use for the infrastructures and operating systems, middleware, networks, as well as the database management system. For example, if you are having the software architecture, so we need to check that what is the size of the source line of code. Okay, if it is a 1 million, then we need to, it is very extremely, because we cannot have the, it is very difficult to find out the number of bugs or the issues here. And we require the fault tolerance, means whenever the error is happened, so automatically it has to be repaired and transmit the information from one point to the another point, and also having the data processing performance. Okay, the data processing performance has to be improved when we are having very lengthy of the source line of code here. And also we need to use the different types of the configurations for the executable for the same source sets here. Okay, and also we have seen that the versions, so versions can be differ, and we need to check that what are the threads of processing can be used for the subsets of the scenario. And we need to take the backup is very important, because if the system is failure, so we cannot take the backup. So that's why every week or the monthly, when you're taking the backup, the information will be stored very securely in a different storage area. And we need to verify about the different types of the versions, means previous versions and the changed versions, so that it will be very helpful for the reconfiguration scenarios. And also functionally equivalent versions of the two preceding configurations. So they need to check that what is the, which one will be very useful and improving the throughput. So ultimate response. So whenever we are accessing the data or the resources, within the stipulated time, the information has to be displayed, so that the throughput and the response times will be improved. If not, we may have the critical threat scenario. so the information cannot be accessed. And also it is similar for the servers also. Why means in servers, whenever we are accessing the information, so we need to get the resources or the data within particular time here. So here one target process and shadow thread of servers. So they need to consider the separate backup target process, and they need to have the thread independent user interface clients so that the informations can be easily accessed. And mainly in the servers, they need to have the dynamic reconfiguration. So dynamic reconfiguration is very important for the final target configuration. And also in the deployment, okay, in the deployment mainly the customers has to be check the final test, and the information has to be transmitted to the deployment configuration, because here in the deployment they need to check that performance should be very high, and reliable object request brokers, and to have the different types of the implementations, including for the workstations operating system and embedded processors, large frame mainframe operating system, and the different types of the real-time operating system. So whenever we are considering the different types of the implementation, this information or the resources has to be allocated very carefully, because the performance has to be improved. And also they need to check that various compilers and the languages implementations of the network softwares. So mainly nowadays we are going to have the heterogeneity. So we have the homogeneous as well as the heterogeneity. Homogeneous is nothing but the same resources we are using, whereas the heterogeneity is nothing but different types of the resources we are using. Okay, so when you are using the heterogeneity, it will be very helpful for the target configuration results, so that it will be very highly sophisticated source code, and it will be suited for the different types of the deployment anti-crafts. Okay, so these are the references. Okay, thank you.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.